The day I realized my silence had real weight was the day no one knew my name in a company that couldn't breathe without me. I wasn't on the org chart, no Slack profile, no team photo from last year's mandatory fun escape room event. But the code, the logic, the bone marrow of the entire damn system Kavara was betting its future on, that was all me. Quietly, invisibly, uncredited. Just a contractor, at least on paper. They kept me under a shell vendor agreement, filed 2 subsidiaries deep, like some kind of compliance nesting doll. Why? Because the CFO, Marcus, understood 2 things. 1, politics kill progress, and 2, I don't do politics. I do clean architecture, auditable logic, elegant systems that scream when tampered with. I'd been at Kavara for 27 months, officially billed as back-end compliance consultant, unofficially the architect of their flagship financial operations engine. See, Kavara wasn't just writing enterprise software, they were selling a dream to banks. Let us automate your operational audits, the pitch went. Let our software trigger lending conditions based on live performance data. Which sounds slick, until you realize how easy that is to abuse, unless someone like me builds in the skeleton. And that's what I did. A system so tightly wired into its own integrity that any unauthorized tampering sent up flares. A digital conscience, you might say, but you wouldn't know that from walking past my desk because I didn't have a desk. I logged in from my kitchen table, same table where my cat once puked on an Ethernet cable during a sprint review. My name was never called in town halls. HR never remembered to CC me on policy updates. And I liked it that way. No birthday cards, no gendered women in tech LinkedIn posts with my face plastered under a Canva graphic. Just clean code, cryptic commit messages, and a direct line to Marcus when the architecture needed finesse. And you know what? I was fine with that. I didn't want the spotlight. Let the VPs elbow each other for headcount and LinkedIn glory posts. I'd rather sip coffee from a chipped mug and build something no one else understood until it broke. Hey, by the way, if you're deep into this story already and haven't subscribed or hit the like button, don't be that guy. Seriously, 90% of y'all just lurk. Show the team some love, it's what keeps this engine humming, unlike Kavara's apparently. Anyway, Marcus was the only one who got it. He gave me space, autonomy, and most importantly, authority. We had a good rhythm. Every other week, we'd hop on a quiet call. He'd say things like keep them honest or bake in the boundaries. I'd deliver. He never micromanaged, never asked for slide decks or Jira dashboards. Just results, and I gave them. Our system passed 2 external audits in 2023 alone, which kept our revolving door of executives blissfully unaware of how many times I'd patched around their mistakes. He told me once, "You're the parachute they don't know they're wearing." Then he got sick. No warning. Just a note from his assistant saying he'd be on medical leave for a few weeks. That was it. No voice call. No prep meeting. One minute I was reporting to the only person who understood the structure. The next I was dangling in the wind with a system only I knew how to interpret and no clear backup plan. Enter Eric, Vice President of Strategic Ops, which as far as I could tell meant he sat in meetings and added nothing of value while quietly calculating who he could step on to reach the next rung. You know the type? Starched shirts, laminated buzzwords, and a LinkedIn banner of him at Davos, even though he only went to Switzerland once for a ski trip with his ex's uncle. Eric had a master's in organizational optimization, which is code for firing people and making spreadsheets about it. The minute Marcus was gone, Eric bloomed like mold in a flooded basement. Started showing up in meetings he'd never cared about, asking who owns this line item, and why are we still contracting this out? He didn't even know my name the first week, just referred to me as the compliance module resource. He started realigning teams, called it a visibility phase, which translated to, everyone had to submit weekly reports, roadmaps, and status updates, except me. Of course, because I wasn't on his books. I was still technically buried in a vendor agreement written in legalese and held in a shared drive he didn't even know existed. But I knew this game. I've lived through 6 reorgs in my career. You don't flinch. You don't speak, you watch, and you document everything. So I kept building, kept logging in, kept tweaking the logic trees that governed whether the system would throw alerts to our bank partner. I'd built in a credential flag, just a quiet signature embedded in the core modules like a watermark. If that signature got tampered with, boom, instant reauthentication request from the bank. Not malicious, not dramatic, just protocol. But it meant the system would stop the moment someone tried to erase me without the proper procedure. Which, let's be real, no one ever reads. So I waited, I documented, I archived, and I kept an encrypted copy of everything, because I knew damn well the storm was coming. I just didn't know it would arrive in a smug little envelope delivered over coffee, with a side of corporate delusion. Marcus's absence dropped like a piano onto a quiet sidewalk. One week we were talking about versioning schema over Slack at midnight, the next he was gone, out for urgent treatment, no further detail, indefinite leave. Just like that, the only person in the entire damn org who knew what I did, and more importantly, why I did it, was off the chessboard. I didn't panic, not at first. Marcus was the kind of guy who left breadcrumbs, buried keys, a trail of logic even in his absences, We had a process. We had encryption protocols. There was a backup credential stack in a vault only he and I had access to. I figured, worst case scenario, he'd brief whoever stepped in. But Eric didn't want a briefing. Eric wanted control. Within 72 hours of Marcus's exit, Eric declared himself acting operational lead and started moving furniture, figuratively and literally. Entire teams got renamed. Directors were streamlined. Slack channels disappeared. He even had the nerve to send an all-staff memo with the subject line, "New era, new energy." I swear, I could feel Marcus's ulcer growing from wherever he was recovering. Eric had always been one of those second-tier guys, hovering just outside decision-making rooms, sniffing for weakness. The kind who says, "Let's align," before stabbing you in the quarterly review. And now that he had a sliver of power, he wanted to squeeze it until it screamed. First came the visibility push. Everyone had to submit weekly reports, personal impact logs, and 15-slide updates on their value-add vectors. I watched a senior engineer cry in a hallway Zoom window over having to color-code their roadmap. They'd worked here 12 years, built the payment gateway that processed 80% of our client transactions, but none of that mattered to Eric if it wasn't on a PowerPoint. And me, I was a ghost, a non-line item. My contract wasn't in HR's main system. I wasn't on his org chart. There was no Julie in the directory he had access to, because Marcus had tucked me deep into the guts of a compliance budget no one ever questioned. At first, I thought that protected me. Then came the Friday ping. One line, no greeting, no signature. Your access will be reviewed soon. Please be prepared to justify your continued involvement. That was it. No context, no hi. Just a veiled threat typed by some lackey with a superiority complex and a template. I stared at it for a full minute, took a sip of cold coffee, then laughed just once short mean. I knew what that meant. I'd seen it before. Review meant removal. Justify meant beg, and I don't beg. I've been quietly replaced enough times in my life to spot the smoke before the fire. The review would come with a meeting I wasn't prepared for, followed by a decision already made. Still, I didn't react. I nodded to the empty room, closed the tab, and opened my version control logs instead. You know what they never think about? Continuity. They think deleting someone's credentials makes them vanish. They think ownership of IP is something you yell into a conference call and it becomes law. They don't understand systems, dependencies, intent. Eric had no idea that the very system he was about to poke had teeth. I had built it to audit itself. Every key decision, every logic gate, every internal rule had attribution embedded. It wasn't just code. It was a living map of who told it to do what. And you can't retroactively strip that without causing a mess. A very visible, very traceable mess. But Eric was running around like a kid with scissors, convinced he was cutting ribbons instead of arteries. He made his rounds on Monday, started asking around about cost centers. By Tuesday, he was holding discretionary expense reviews. Wednesday, one of my senior devs pinged me with a "just got reassigned." Eric's pushing for contractor consolidation. Translation, you're next. Thursday night, I got a second email. This one had his name on it. Need to clarify the scope of your involvement. Please join me for a brief sync tomorrow morning at 8:30. Bring documentation of deliverables. Bring documentation. The man really said that, like I was some intern begging for college credit. I didn't reply. I didn't prep a pitch. I didn't dig through Gantt charts or pull KPI stats. I didn't need to. I was the deliverable. My work lived in the veins of that platform. It was one of those rare truths in a corporate world full of fluff. Without me, it wouldn't work. They just hadn't realized it yet. And I had a feeling Eric was about to learn the hard way what happens when you fire the ghost holding the keys. Friday morning, 8:27 a.m. The invite said 8:30, but I wasn't about to give Eric the satisfaction of calling me late. I stood outside his office door, if you could call it that, one of those glass-box fishbowls they give middle managers to feel important. He was already inside, typing with two fingers like a toddler playing whack-a-mole on a keyboard. The second he saw me through the glass, he smiled. Not friendly, triumphant. He gestured without standing. "Julie, come in." No handshake, no chair offered. Just a man in a fitted shirt too tight across the shoulders, trying to play kingmaker in a sandbox. "I'll keep this brief," he began, folding his hands over a manila folder like it was a presidential briefing. "We've done a full review of your contract, or lack thereof, really. It seems your role here isn't formally defined. No W-2, no HR file, no system owner assignment. Just a lot of vague references and back-end commits from a vendor ID. That's not sustainable." I didn't move, didn't blink, just let him talk. Theatrical silence unnerves guys like this. He took a breath, like he was winding up for the big finale. "You've contributed to some valuable architecture. I won't deny that," he said, in the same tone you'd use to compliment a barista's latte art. "But value needs ownership. And right now, there's too much ambiguity around yours. So, effective immediately, your contract is terminated. Please remove all company-related files from your local environment. Delete any proprietary code or documentation. You'll receive a final payout via your vendor." And of course, he paused here, smirking like he was delivering a punchline only he thought was clever. "All your work belongs to the company now." I smiled, just slightly, like someone who's already packed their bags before the breakup. Any questions? He added, smug. Just one, I said. Do you mind putting that in writing? He blinked, but only for a second. Then he reached for the folder and slid a single-page memo across the table. It was already printed, already signed. To whom it may concern, effective immediately, the services of vendor, Larkspur Systems and associated personnel, duly redacted, are no longer required. All proprietary work conducted under this agreement is considered the intellectual property of Kavara Holdings, Inc. All local data and systems must be permanently deleted. Eric Donovan, VP Strategic Ops. I read it once, folded it neatly, slipped it into my bag. Understood, I said. I didn't defend myself, didn't argue, didn't explain that the language in his memo directly violated 3 clauses of the original vendor agreement Marcus had filed under the CFO's compliance umbrella, because explaining would imply I needed his permission to exist. Instead, I stood, nodded once, and walked out. No dramatic door slam, no parting shot, just the click of my heels on laminate tile and the whir of the badge reader as I handed in my access card to a receptionist who looked like she wanted to disappear into the ficus plant beside her. By 9:10 a.m., I was back at my apartment. I made coffee, sat in silence, watched the steam curl above the mug like breath in winter. My laptop was open and the terminal waited. Lank expectant, I opened my local repository. Thousands of lines of code. Branches, diffs, documentation trails, all of it mine, all of it tied to my digital signature. And now, per Eric's order, all of it slated for deletion, so I did exactly what he asked. I deleted everything. I didn't archive it, didn't hide it in some encrypted folder or squirrel it away in a private repo. I deleted the local environment, the dev tools, the mirror backups, the test harnesses, even the architecture diagrams stored in my OneNote. Gone, all of it like it had never existed. But see, Eric made a fatal assumption. He thought my laptop was the system. What he didn't understand, what Marcus did, was that my real value wasn't in the code I stored. It was in what I built into the code. Triggers, checks, identity flags, compliance logic that screamed when it was tampered with. He hadn't just fired a contractor. He'd yanked a thread out of a live circuit, thinking it was decorative. And now that thread was sparking. Before I shut the lid, I did one more thing. I opened a secure cloud drive I hadn't touched in over a year. Encrypted, 2-factor authenticated, accessed only through a fingerprint-secured terminal app Marcus had once jokingly called my black box. Inside was a folder named just in case. I opened it. There it was, the memo. Scanned, time-stamped, signed by Eric Donovan, directly instructing me to delete active company IP. I duplicated it, not because I needed to use it right away, but because something in me had shifted, something cold, metallic, precise. It wasn't fear. Fear was soft. This was different. This was war protocol. And Eric, he just fired the one person holding the detonation codes. Eric didn't waste a second savoring his tiny power trip. By noon, I was already getting word through back channels, Slack messages from engineers who knew better than to openly acknowledge me. The tone was always the same, forced casual, vaguely apologetic. Hey, just heard you're off the project? That sucks. Eric's calling it a streamlining. He said you were legacy overhead, unclear if he knows what half your code does. FYI, he told the data team you left voluntarily. Said something about rotating in fresh perspective. Also, what the hell is happening with the metrics dashboard? I didn't reply, just read and archived. Eric apparently had done a little victory lap that morning, popped into the product lead's huddle and bragged about cleaning out inefficiencies. Said I was a black box dev who'd been over-architecting things. One of the junior PMs swore he heard Eric say I kept legacy code alive just to justify my existence. Cute. Let him talk. Let him posture. Meanwhile, somewhere far above Eric's pay grade, a different kind of alert had already fired off. At 1:46 p.m., a compliance flag hit Kavara's secured banking dashboard, one I had wired directly into the heartbeat of the ops system. A deletion event tied to a credential that hadn't gone through formal offboarding. My credential? My signature. Purged under verbal instruction, with no audit trail, no handoff log, no revocation record. You don't just delete that and walk away. Not when that signature is hard-coded into the system's operational trust logic. Not when your bank partner uses that very signature to determine whether your org is operating within the thresholds defined in your loan agreement. Kavara's line of credit wasn't some rubber-stamped overdraft. It was conditional. Contingent on provable, monitored operational integrity. And I was part of that proof. My credential was baked into the compliance scaffolding like rebar in concrete. Pull it out wrong and the whole thing wobbles. By 2:03 p.m., a freeze order was issued. Kavara's $18.5 million revolving line of credit was locked pending internal review. Not canceled, not revoked, just suspended, like a parent pausing an allowance when they hear a crash from the next room. Quiet, subtle, devastating, and Eric, he didn't notice. At least not yet. He was too busy posting in the #Ops leadership channel about reducing contractor reliance and suggesting we in-house compliance accountability. He even linked a Medium article about agile transparency, which, fun fact, was written by a man who got fired from his own startup for stealing competitor code. I logged out of Slack. Then I poured myself a glass of wine. It wasn't joy. It wasn't smugness. It was something quieter, like watching a Rube Goldberg machine you built with spare parts finally tip its first domino. I knew how this would play out. The system would flag the deletion. The bank's bot would ping the compliance portal. Our liaison, Janelle, a sharp ex-regulator with zero tolerance for risk, would call legal. Legal would check the logs, see the deletion tied to my contractor ID, and ask who authorized it. Then the real fun would begin, because the answer would be no one. No official offboarding, no transfer of system ownership, no shutdown protocol, just one VP's smug directive and a signed memo that violated internal policy so thoroughly, it might as well have been written in Comic Sans. I sat back and opened the secure drive again, watched the timestamp memo like it was a live grenade I'd tucked in the center console. I didn't need to use it, not yet. The system was doing the work for me. I kept waiting for my phone to ring. It didn't, but the emails started. First came the one from Janelle, CC'd to legal, IT security, and two people I'd never heard of. Subject, urgent unscheduled credential removal detected anomalous activity observed within compliance module architecture. User, Larkspur, ID 4038, registered deletion event without standard deactivation protocol. This violates Kavara Bank certification standards. Please advise. No one had replied yet. I didn't need them to. I knew what was coming next. See, Eric thought he was erasing me. What he actually did was amputate a limb mid-marathon and call it weight loss. The system was designed to detect injury. It was reacting. Slowly, precisely, without drama. Just escalating the way a healthy immune system escalates a foreign body. And all I had to do now? Wait. Let the antibodies do their thing. Marcus returned on a Monday morning with the quiet intensity of a man who'd skipped recovery to stop a plane from crashing. He didn't tell anyone he was coming back early. No Slack pings. No all-staff memo. He just walked into the building at 8:02 a.m., bypassed reception, and headed straight for the executive suite like he'd never left. By 8:07, legal was in a panic. See, the bank hadn't just frozen our credit line, they'd sent a formal notice to Marcus's email. Not to Eric, not to finance, to Marcus directly. Because the system, my system, had been built under his signature. His approval, his authorization. The compliance chain was designed to treat Marcus as the final point of trust. When the system lost integrity, the bank's systems didn't care about internal promotions or interim VPs. They cared about credentials. Marcus's was still tagged as the top of the pyramid. He read the alert at 6:43 a.m., just after finishing his second round of antibiotics. He got in the car before finishing his coffee. So when Eric rolled in late with a croissant and an oat milk latte, smug and oblivious, he didn't realize the weather inside had already changed. I didn't find out until later, but apparently the first thing Marcus said when he walked into the legal conference room was, "Why the hell is Julie's credential showing a non-standard termination event?" Dead silence. Then a flurry of mouse clicks, folder openings, password requests. Two people got locked out trying to access outdated SSO tokens. Nobody had an answer. Legal fumbled through their change logs, but there was no offboarding ticket for me. No formal shutdown. No compliance handoff. No internal documentation of the deletion event, just Eric's memo. Scanned into the system late Friday evening with no countersignature and no attached action plan. Julie was a contractor, Eric said when he was finally pulled into the room. We had no legal obligation to onboard or offboard her through internal systems. She had no claim to system ownership. It was cleanup, that's all. Marcus stared at him for a long moment, then asked one question. "Did you authorize the deletion?" Eric blinked. Yes, I asked her to remove her local data. Standard practice. You asked her to delete operational IP while still credentialed to the system? Eric shifted in his seat. Well, I assumed you assumed? That's when the sweating started. Marcus didn't yell. He didn't throw things or slam his laptop shut like some startup caricature. He just kept asking calm, precise questions that Eric couldn't answer. Did you review the compliance logic before issuing that directive? No, but did you consult infrastructure about the credential flag embedded in the audit loop? I wasn't aware there was one. You weren't aware? Marcus repeated, quieter now. Julie embedded a multi-factor logic validator tied to her signature. That was approved in March. You signed the roadmap. Eric's mouth opened, then closed, like a fish realizing the tank wall was glass. The room went still. At that point, Marcus opened his laptop and projected my credentials on the wall. Highlighted in red was the authentication chain, my ID, the timestamp of deletion, the failure cascade that followed, and the bank's alert log all syncing perfectly. It was clean, precise. I'd built it that way, because I knew one day someone would try to erase the scaffolding without understanding what it held up. Back in my apartment, I watched the chaos unfold from a polite distance. Janelle forwarded me the audit trail summary, CCing Marcus. No commentary, just data. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Marcus already knew the truth. And Eric was realizing that when you swing an axe at a ghost, you better pray the ghost doesn't haunt the foundation. Legal pulled the thread and the whole damn sweater started to unravel. They started with the basics. Termination process, missing. Credential revocation log missing. Handoff documentation non-existent. There was no paper trail because Eric never created one. He'd operated on swagger and assumptions, then signed a memo so arrogantly sloppy it should have come with a warning label: do not expose to daylight or regulatory scrutiny. The legal team was not amused. They weren't loud about it. These weren't people who shouted. They dissected, whispered, passed documents across tables with slow, surgical disgust. One by one, they ticked boxes on their compliance checklist, and each one came up empty. No documented offboarding procedure, no approval from the compliance officer, no backup credential manager assigned, no contingency for system integrity verification. It was like watching someone fail an open book test on fire safety after torching the building. Eric tried to pivot, said I was just a contractor. His favorite phrase now, like he thought it was a shield. Every time someone raised a point, he repeated it, just a contractor, as if that erased the architectural backbone I'd built into the guts of their compliance engine, as if external status negated internal consequence. He made the rounds all week, squirming from one meeting to the next with that frozen sales bro smile cracking around the edges. She had no authority over platform-level compliance logic, he said on Tuesday. Her work was non-critical, he told legal on Wednesday. None of this would have happened if the system had been documented better, he added Thursday, in what might go down as the most ironic cell phone in Kavara history. But documentation wasn't the problem. I had documented everything. The system was transparent for anyone who actually read the specs Marcus and I had built. The problem was Eric had tried to fire the architect while standing inside the house. The real shift came when Marcus got his hands on that memo. He sat in his office, blinds half closed, the document lying flat on the desk in front of him. No fanfare, no dramatic music. Just him and a page that would soon become legend in the halls of Kavara, Eric's Friday morning directive. Effective immediately, all local data and systems must be permanently deleted. Marcus, read it 3 times. Then he read it aloud. Then he pushed his chair back and said, quietly but firmly, he ordered the contractor to erase system-critical IP while still credentialed with active ties to compliance tracking. Nobody said a word. That sentence echoed like a gunshot in a library. The lead compliance officer, a woman named Taran who usually never spoke above a whisper, looked up and simply said, that's grounds for breach classification. Possibly multiple. And suddenly, Eric wasn't just the guy who fumbled a handoff. He was a risk factor. I wasn't in the room. But I heard all this later piecemeal, relayed through Slack whispers, late-night emails, and one deliciously cathartic phone call from a QA engineer who used to fear Eric like a feral cat fears thunder. Julie, she said, they've moved him off Slack access. Legals got him under a review protocol. Marcus called it a containment phase. Containment, what a beautiful word, at home. I sat with my laptop closed and a cup of tea going cold. The secure drive stayed untouched. The backup memo sat dormant. I hadn't needed to weaponize anything. The truth had done all the heavy lifting. Still, I didn't feel triumphant, not yet. That flicker of justice, it was real but faint, like seeing headlights far down a dark road. You squint, you wait, you don't exhale until they're close enough to blind you. Eric wasn't done, he was slippery. And slippery people don't go down easy. They flail, they bargain, they gaslight and spin until someone slaps the mic out of their hand. But now there were cracks. He couldn't deny what he'd signed, couldn't walk back the deletion order, couldn't spin just a contractor into a shield against the bank's frozen credit line. And best of all, he had no idea what was still waiting for him, because I wasn't done either. The message came in at 7:12 a.m. No greeting, no signature, just a line. Did he tell you to delete it? It was Marcus. Of course it was. No one else asked questions that cut straight through the bullshit like a scalpel through butter. No legal posturing, no PR filter. Just that one sentence sitting in my inbox like a lit match on a gas leak. I didn't reply with words. I just forwarded the memo. The one Eric had so confidently handed me across his little faux mahogany desk, still warm from the printer tray. His name stamped at the bottom, his language clear. His hubris preserved in PDF like an insect in amber. 2 minutes later, I got the read receipt. 4 minutes after that, I watched an encrypted Dropbox folder flicker to life. Access, temporary CFO channel. Inside, I saw my old documentation, contracts, change logs, system maps, files Marcus had apparently archived even after legal wiped me off the books. He never really let go of the reins, not fully. I'd been erased from the system but not from his memory. Smart man. He knew I'd built our audit logic like a suspension bridge, elegant, weight-bearing, but anchored in very specific places. And if you pulled out one of those anchors without re-engineering the entire support system, you didn't get a reorg, you got a collapse. Around 10:40, the CFO's office responded to the bank's latest request. Please provide documented justification for the deletion of Julie Redacted S credential and a full map of her operational access. Marcus didn't send them a white paper. He sent them Eric's memo. No edits, no cover letter, just the raw directive. Dated, signed, time stamped an hour before the credential deletion that triggered the entire compliance cascade. The bank's compliance officer responded with a single line: "We've received enough. Investigation proceeding." You could almost hear the temperature drop 3 degrees through the fiber lines. That's when the second call came. This one wasn't from Marcus, it was from Janelle at the bank. "We're moving into the verification stage. We need system assurance from the original architect." That phrase, original architect, landed soft in my ear, but sharp in the chest. Like being handed back a name someone else tried to burn off your skin. I didn't gloat, didn't say told you so or ask what took them so long. I simply asked for the validation scope, reviewed the request list, logged in through the temporary credential Marcus had reactivated for me, one-time use, single-factor access for restoration only. I didn't rebuild anything. I just verified the damage. The logs were exactly what I expected. Attempted overwrite of the credential anchor, failed triggers on the compliance hooks, audit loop rejections cascading like dominoes. I ran one integrity pass on the system's logic shell and sent the results as a clean CSV, annotated in my usual deadpan style. This structure was designed to fail if altered without credentialed oversight. It did. That's all I wrote. No fluff, no emotion, just fact. The machine had worked. The trap had sprung, and now it was documenting its own dismemberment like a forensic pathologist. Back in Kavara's offices, the walls were closing in. Eric wasn't gone yet, but he was surrounded. His Slack status had gone gray, the kind of gray that doesn't mean busy or away but lawyered, and me, I was still at home. Same chipped coffee mug. Same cat sprawled across the printer, but something had shifted. I wasn't the ghost anymore. I was the echo, the proof, the original architect. And Eric's world was collapsing under the weight of something he never saw coming: quiet, deliberate accountability. Rage was a distant memory now. Cold fire burned out. All that remained was observation, clinical, detached. I wasn't steering the ship. I was just watching the black box record everything as it sank. And in that stillness, in that perfect, airless moment, I felt something like peace. Not forgiveness, not closure, just gravity doing its job. Monday morning came dressed in corporate drag, sunlight through the blinds, burnt coffee in the break room, and the smell of nervous sweat pretending to be deodorant. But Eric strolled in like it was just another day in his little fiefdom. He walked through the lobby with that same puffed chest swagger, Bluetooth earpiece jammed in like he was waiting for a call from Elon Musk. The front desk girl didn't say good morning. Neither did the elevator. At the 14th floor, the doors opened, and he stepped out like Caesar returning from campaign, until he saw them. Marcus was already inside his glass box of an office, back to the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled, memo in hand. Next to him stood Angela from legal, posture so stiff she could have been carved from audit-grade granite. No one said a word. Eric froze just half a step into the carpet. You know that scene in old westerns where the saloon goes quiet and everyone stops moving but the fan? That was the whole floor. Developers stopped typing. PMs glanced sideways. Someone at reception coughed like it was a gunshot. Marcus didn't motion him in. He just looked at him, held that gaze like a steady hand on a trigger. Eric walked in. Angela shut the door behind them. No pleasantries, no laptop open. Just a man holding a single sheet of paper and the exact tone of voice you use right before a verdict. "The bank just called," Marcus said, his voice ice smooth. "Tell me exactly what you told her to do." Eric blinked, twice. I instructed her to remove local data. Standard policy under termination, exactly what you told her to do. Eric's mouth opened and shut again, like a goldfish auditioning for an alibi. I told her per the memo that her services were terminated immediately and to delete any proprietary data from her system. I assumed, Angela cut in, sharp as a blade. "You assumed what, Mr. Donovan?" "That she'd been properly offboarded," he stammered. "That the credential triggers had been reset." Marcus didn't blink. "Did you check?" Eric swallowed. "No." "Did you verify her architecture before issuing the deletion?" "No, but I thought no." "But you thought," Marcus echoed quietly. "You thought the ghost writer of our compliance engine, the one tied to our bank's active line of credit, could be deleted like an expired Google Drive file. And now, that ghost has bank-side validation credentials, and you handed her the detonator." Angela slid a file across the desk. Bank logs, audit failures. A timestamped deletion event tied directly to Eric's Friday morning memo. "You triggered a cascading compliance failure," she said, "which froze $18.5 million in operating credit. You exposed us to breach, classification, and potential investor fallout." Eric's voice dropped. "It was a misunderstanding." Marcus leaned forward, one hand flat on the desk, the other still holding the memo like it was radioactive. "No," he said, cold and final. "It was negligence. And now we're on a 72-hour remediation leash with a partner who doesn't make second mistakes. They want documentation, they want assurance, and they want the one person you erased brought back in to clean up your mess." Eric said nothing. Outside the office, a couple of engineers pretended to refill water bottles for the third time that hour. The entire floor was pretending not to listen. But they all heard it when Marcus said, "You're suspended from all platform operations, effective immediately." Eric's chair creaked under the silence. He didn't stand. didn't argue. He just sat there, pale and blinking, like a man watching the credits roll on a movie he thought he was starring in, only to find out he was the villain all along. Angela gathered the files. Marcus opened his laptop. The board was waiting. So was the bank. And for the first time in his climb-up-the-ladder life, Eric Donovan was no longer in control of anything except how long he could keep from vomiting in his own mouth. And me. I was logged in from a one-time credential, watching the same logs Marcus had. No access to edit, no need. The code spoke for itself now. The system was louder than I'd ever been. All I had to do was watch. By 4:17 p.m., Eric was gone. Not fired, pending compliance investigation. The kind of phrase that sounds like it's wearing a tie and holding a shovel. They didn't even let him return to his desk. IT disabled his badge before legal finished the sentence. Security walked him out with all the grace of a sitcom extra. He didn't argue, he didn't wave, he didn't make eye contact, he just disappeared into the elevator. Left behind was the memo, the audits, the vacuum, and me. Marcus called at 4:43, no small talk, no preamble. We've reinstated your contractor access under the Larkspur shell. Bank's request. One-time credential. Scope is validation only. Restore what you can, I said, understood. He added, Julie, thank you. I didn't respond. There's a certain silence you earn, one that doesn't need to be filled with pleasantries or apologies. He knew what he let Eric do. He knew I'd been erased without a second thought. But now he also knew who kept the company breathing when no one else noticed the chest compressions. At 5:09 p.m., I logged in from a cold boot terminal. The system recognized me. My name still sat embedded deep in the compliance scaffolding, right where I'd left it, tagged behind logic, triggers, and identity verifiers that hadn't failed, only waited. I pulled from my encrypted remote. Not a backup, a template, clean, untouched, fully legal under my original agreement. No IP theft, no violation, just architecture waiting for reassembly. Within 12 minutes, the base compliance module was restored. Error logs cleared, audit loop re-engaged, credential trust re-established. The bank's dashboard flickered green. No fanfare, no applause, just quiet confirmation from a cold machine that the ghost had returned and made the walls stop shaking. I typed 3 final commands, logged the restoration note, flagged the memo, attached a single PDF, per original system spec, unauthorized credential removal triggers automatic integrity cascade. This behavior was not accidental. It was the design. I hit send. Then I logged out. No cape, no dramatic music, no corporate redemption arc. I closed the laptop, unplugged the charger, stared at the nothingness of my quiet apartment, filled with old coffee rings and the hum of a fridge that had more stability than most executives I'd worked under. Later that night, Marcus texted, "We're working on reinstating your contract longer term. Let's talk options." I didn't reply, not because I was angry, not anymore, because I knew better. I knew Kavara would survive. I knew the board would smooth it over, rebrand the failure, say we've learned a lot through this process. Probably bring in some polished consultant with an expensive haircut to present a deck on resilience through restructure. Let them. My job was done. I'd built something honest. It broke the way it was supposed to. And when it mattered, it spoke louder than any title, badge, or ladder climber with a god complex. As I closed the lid on my laptop and took the last sip of lukewarm tea, I whispered one thing into the empty room, just for me. Not bitter, not loud. Next time, I said quietly, read what you're signing. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.